Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. Nor did he believe it now, though he looked the phantom through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes, and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, which wrapper he had observed before, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Asked me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for a shade." He was going to say to a shade, but substituted this as more appropriate. "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. "I can." "Do it then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of it being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on opposite side of the fireplace as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me," observed the ghost. "I don't." "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than grave about you, whatever you are." This morning, we're going to talk about dreams. And not just dreams, but those moments in our life that we cannot easily explain, when the divine makes its presence known in ways we are unwilling to admit to others, and sometimes unwilling even to admit to ourselves. This Advent, we're talking about listening to God. We talked about John and how we hear God speaking to us in the voice of those around us, those that we care and love and trust. And last week we heard the story of Zechariah and how God can speak to us in our shared rituals, our community gathered around, a community that's gathered to practice our faith together, hearing the scriptures, praying, sharing a meal, sharing our resources, and being sent out into the world with the good news. This morning, we hear the story of Joseph and his dream. A dream he had in which the angel appeared to him and told him to do something that was not entirely in his own self-interest. At least not obviously. And told to go ahead and marry his fiancée who was pregnant, and he was not the father. There are a lot of dreams in Matthew's story. Joseph, more than once, the Magi. I don't know if any of you have dreams a lot. I dream all the time. I have all kinds of dreams pretty much every night. Some great, some peaceful, some terrible and terrifying. I don't think in my own personal waking life I have ever been as afraid as I have been in some of the dreams I've had. Honestly, maybe that's good. Kind of prepares you for real life in some ways. But we aren't just talking about dreams necessarily, or even just waking visions. We're talking about those moments, those experiences of the divine presence. The kind of stories that we captured a few years ago in our Epiphany stories, if you remember the videos that we did a while back that's still up on our website. Moments that are a little bit more than our typical experience of daily life, when God's presence is made known to us, when the divine touches us. One thing I recall from some of those stories was that they do typically occur in dreams or meditation or prayer, times when our minds and our hearts and our bodies are quiet. In dreams, we slow down. We're not distracted by the hullabaloo of life. We are still. I don't think you will hear God speaking if you're constantly in motion, if you're constantly going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, from one thing to another, always immersing yourself in the busy, anxious hustle of life. Unless you take moments of quiet, time to reflect, time to wonder, time to meditate, to sit, to walk gently on the earth, you will not hear God speaking, maybe until God is literally having to shout at you. And some of us have been shouted at by God, probably. We have heard these stories, just most recently in our sharing this fall. Rick's vision, Nancy being touched in prayer, physically feeling being touched. These are stories like Joseph's dream. Stories we can doubt, stories we can dismiss, stories we can ignore, or we can take them seriously. That God is not just up in heaven in judgment, keeping the universe heading down a particular predetermined path. But rather, God is down here among us, with us, in this divine creation, drawing us into a divine embrace. And that this is the entire point and message of Christmas to begin with. That God is here among us and with us as one of us in our life as we live it. And to prepare for that revelation that is always being revealed, we must be open and hopeful to those dreams and visions, those smells and sounds, those touches and tastes that are a part of these experiences. I have been in an empty room that suddenly smelled powerfully of citrus and fruit. I've been outside on a hot, dry, sunny day and smelled the damp moisture of a coming rain. I have heard a voice say, "Here I am." I have seen the risen Christ in a waking vision. I have felt a burden laid on my shoulders. I've been visited by spirits in my dreams. Contrary to what you may have heard or been taught, these are not unusual. I mean, they are in the sense that, they just aren't every part of everyday life. But I think we have all experienced these things. But sometimes or often, we have dismissed them like old Ebenezer. Made excuses, thought nothing of it, ignored it. That these things are more gravy than grave. And so we've been robbed of these experiences. We have had something precious stolen from us, something drained from us, and it is high time that we recover it. Because this is an important and life-giving aspect of our lives. Now, I want to address a couple of things real quick, because these experiences can and have caused trouble. And they relate to what we do with them. First, there's a big difference between experience a sense of closeness to God or being one with His transcendent, universal, divine, infinite thing, and getting a message, as in, God told me to do this, which is kind of what happens in John and Joseph in this story. And also, there's a really big difference between God told me to do this and such, and God told me to tell you that you need to do this. These things are always worked out in community. We hear it clearly in our other stories that we'll cover again next week. And I have to assume and believe that this is true of Joseph's story, that he had to go and talk to his family and Mary about what he was planning to do and why. I don't know if his parents were happy with his decision or not. My guess is they were at least reticent and were just like, what? Seriously, Joseph, what are you doing? But this is a revelation about a relationship. It doesn't stand on its own. He wasn't told to go and do this on his own. So any experience we have, especially when one feels directed to do something, is always worked out in the community that's gathered around the divine and what God is doing. Second, we must not elevate these experiences as if they were the end-all, be-all of life. They are gifts. They're remarkable. They are like monuments in our lives that remind us that God is always with us. God is always active. But we shouldn't turn them into an idol that we pursue to the negligence of everything else. They are a blessing that keeps us grounded to daily life, the life that we are living. You know, like the Transfiguration story, they're all up on the mountain. Jesus starts glowing. Moses and Elijah show up. Everything's amazing. And then they come down off the mountain into demon possession and his followers who are lacking in faith. And Jesus is really, really like frustrated and irritated. He's just like, what am I doing here? What is going on? Right? We do not remain on the mountain, but always following the example of God, enter life again as it is, and to continue to be a part of what God is doing in the world. And that is, I think, what the dream is for. To reveal what God is doing, to guide us into that loving embrace, to help us understand, to learn through experience, like a child learning to tie their shoes or to ride a bike, what God's desire is for a beloved world full of beloved people. To learn what we might even call God's greatest hope for us and for this world. An anticipation of a dawn of what is coming. And what do we call desires and hopes, even of God, if not a dream, if not the dream of God? And maybe that is what listening to God is all about. For our dreams to become one with God's dream. For us to learn to dream the dream of God. Amen.